They're giving us an energy, a power to move and to stir within us, to realize that we are limited only by our own thoughts, yes? We are limited and bound only by the limitations that we have accepted as our own. I'm going to invite you to shed all of those limitations and to be fully present on this Independence Day weekend. And I thought it would be only appropriate to, there was another nation that was involved in the coming about of the independence. In the Declaration of Independence, it might be good to make reference to our English brothers and sisters to begin the message today. So Terence is a little third-grade boy sitting in the midst of the Great Britain in a classroom, and they're having a lesson about independence. And Terence raises his hand and he asks the teacher, Mom, can you tell me what freedom means? Can you really explain what freedom is? And the teacher says, well, of course I can, but, why don't you come forward, Terence, and I'll give you the dictionary. And then you can read and recite to the entire class what freedom really is. And so Terence makes his way forward. The teacher gives him the dictionary, and he looks through F-R, F-R-E-E, and he finally finds it. And he begins to recite to the entire class. Freedom, the ability to do whatever one wants to do, whenever one wants to do it, wherever one wants to do it, regardless of the consequences for anybody else. And the teacher says, pardon me, Terence, I've given you the wrong dictionary. That's the American Abridged Dictionary. Let me give you the proper definition of what freedom is. Here's the thing about freedom. In this church, in this country, we talk a lot about it, don't we? Freedom, it's a holy, blessed, sacred thing. Freedom of religion. The freedom of belief to gather here and to think the way that we think, all of us as individuals and as a collective. The freedom of expression, and we celebrate that this weekend. Many of us were taught as kids, weren't we? To be proud of being part of the home of the brave and the land of the free, even if you put it in the wrong order. And in Unity, we celebrate the fact that we are not told what to believe, but rather we are given the arena, the laboratory, if you will, to find the God of our understanding, to find the energy of life itself by right of our own consciousness, to given a space to explore our own belief, and that's a beautiful thing. But the thing about that is that freedom is only a symbol. That's all it is. It's a symbol. It's a word that means very different things to different people, and I want to explore that a little bit today. Freedom to me is much different than someone who belongs to the LGBTQ community. Freedom to me is very different than perhaps my Jewish brothers and sisters who just down the street, when they were at worship at Shabbat, had Nazi symbols being flashed into their window as they were trying to find the God of their understandings. Their idea of freedom might be a little different than mine. Freedom that I define it as might be different than the veteran who was in the midst of a war and came home and was not celebrated for their efforts. It might be a different depth of freedom that they appreciate with what they have seen, with what they have experienced. Freedom might be very different for the senior citizen who is having to give up their house, to give up their driver's license because of their age, and to have that freedom gone. So it's not for me to tell them what freedom is, it's for them to find out a new freedom. Freedom to me might be very different than my best friend growing up in California who was a Mexican immigrant. Very different definition of freedom. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? Perhaps we can just sit in presence before we answer that question. Last week, we spent some time looking at the differences between freedom for Black Americans and white Americans. And it was a little bit of an uncomfortable dialogue, but it was a beautiful dialogue, and many things came about as a result of that conversation. How about those families who have experienced in the last 10 years and beyond that the loss of their children in a school shooting? My definition of freedom might be very, very different than those parents. And I need to bring a sensitivity to the topic of freedom when I stand here and espouse my definition or somebody else's definition. This made me ask the questions this week. Where does personal freedom end? And where does the whole of freedom begin? Where does my personal freedom end and the collective begin? And if I cannot ask that question, I believe that we have a problem. We have an issue we need to look at. Freedom from an individual standpoint alone cannot stand unless freedom of the collective is also considered. Okay, the minister might meddle a little bit today. My job is to make you think. But I want to say clearly that my personal freedom cannot stand unless the freedom of the collective is also considered in my heart, in my mind, and in my actions. Otherwise, mass chaos ensues. And there are those that would say, we're already there. We're in the midst, in this nation, of mass chaos, on the precipice of a blow-up at any minute. How many people remember the books, The Three Musketeers? As a kid, I looked forward. There was a Three Musketeers cartoon on. I couldn't wait to get up on Sunday morning. We didn't go to church. We went to the cartoons. But there were the Three Musketeers and the movies of the Three Musketeers. I loved them. Her heroism that was demonstrated there. And you all remember their great cry, right? All for one and one for all. And I think sometimes we as Unity students, as New Thought students and Americans that exist in this country today are really okay with the first part of that statement. All for one. There's a lot of rampant energy in the New Thought community that it's all about me. It's all about my individualism and what I can get and what is in my greatest interest. Yet the Unity students don't spend as much time, nor do the Americans, as I have made my assessment and judgment about the country as it is today. We don't like the second half of that equation. One for all. One for all. We like all for one, yes, but then we have to get busy. Being in service, being in community to serve the others in that same community. And that is a short-sightedness that will be the downfall of this nation if we don't get to it. One for Lester, for Mike, for Donna, for Julie, for Ted, for Pat, even you, Don. I believe that we as Americans have forgotten that, and it made me think of the words of John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Oh, wait a minute, I got to get busy. I have to pay a price. I have to sacrifice. I have to give in order to belong to that. Yes, you do. And the same is true of being in a Unity church. There is a requirement in being part of a Unity church to be in it for the whole as much as the individual. Yet some of us have forgotten that. Eleanor Roosevelt, another one of the heroes, said this. Please read it with me. Freedom makes a huge requirement of every human being. With freedom comes responsibility. There it is. Responsible. I am responsible for being a citizen of the nation. I am responsible for being a citizen of the Unity North environment. I am responsible for making this world a better place and not just in it for me. Breathe. When we become a member of a community like Unity North, we make a commitment to behave in specific ways with each other. And they don't pay attention much to it, but it's in our new member ceremony. And there's a question in there, and there's a statement that says, I am as much for the whole as I am the individual. That's a commitment that everybody who's joined this church has made. I am here for the whole as much as I am here for myself, and that will expose any lack of responsibility for the environment or the greater environment or the environment. When many Americans speak of freedom, we tend to emphasize external liberty. You notice that? What I can do, what I can say, what I can buy. It's all an external reality. And there's not necessarily accountability for what we're doing. And I would submit to you today that freedom without accountability becomes tyranny pretty darn quickly. A tyranny that everybody on either side of any aisle is worried about and accusing the other side of. Freedom without responsibility and accountability will become tyranny. The gifts of freedom come with a responsibility, an internal responsibility to use that freedom, to use that power wisely, consciously, mindfully, and very carefully. So we have the freedom to go and to do and to say whatever we want to say without constraint, even if it includes a Nazi flag out in front of a Jewish synagogue. Much as that disgusts me, that is a freedom. And so there is no punishment for the kind of disrespect that was displayed at Chabad of Cobb. Unity members have that same kind of external liberty. We get to seek and to find and to espouse and to speak about the God of our understanding, even if it disagrees with the person on the left and the right of you right now. To seek that God of our understanding without restraint, without oppression. And that's a good thing. That is a really good thing in both cases, the country and this church, when it is in balance, when it is in check, and it is done with a holy, divine purpose, not unconscious, selfish motives. Yes, I'm preaching a little bit today, and that's okay. You've hired me to preach as well as teach, and sometimes I will do that. It must be a divine purpose. Freedom must be used not for unconscious, selfish motives that degrade the same right for everybody else in the nation. I came across a philosopher this week as I prepared. His name is Jacob Needleman. I love what he had to write. I don't know if you can read that. Is it too small? You got it? Let's read that together. Every iconic institution, every political work of conscience behind it, every hard-won right had a corresponding responsibility. Without the inner meaning of freedom and liberty, we have to ask, well, what is this freedom for? A democratic citizen is not a citizen who can do anything he or she wants. It's a citizen who has an obligation at the same time. What are the duties implied by our rights? In a just society, a nation born out of the divine idea, realized or not, of equality, this is a question we should be asking ourselves on Independence Day weekend. What are the duties implied by our rights? How am I using my freedom for good outside of myself? One for all. Parker Palmer was one of my, during seminary, we read a couple Parker Palmer books, and I believe the one that touched me the most was From Me to We. And you'll see in a lot of my talks that I am moving us from a me-centric consciousness, which New Thought has a tendency to live in. It's all about me. Me to we. Parker Palmer meddles way more than I do, and I want to introduce you to some of his ideas that he put into his book, Healing the Heart of Democracy. Just show of hands, how many feel that our nation could use a bit of a healing right now? A lot of hands went up. And I don't care what party you belong to. I don't care what religion you espouse. Hands went up that a healing is a good thing. We can agree upon that. He says if American democracy fails, the ultimate cause will not be foreign invasion. We're all afraid of that. It will not be the power of big money. It will not be the greed and dishonesty of elected officials. It will not be a military coup or some fascist takeover. It will happen because we have become so fearful of each other, of our differences, that we unravel the civic community on which democracy depends. Breathe that in for a second. There's no enemy unless we make an enemy. Jesus said, love your enemies as you love yourself. I'm saying, let's take it a step further. You don't have an enemy unless you make one. And that will be the death of democracy. That will be the death of the Unity Church. That will be the death of peace on earth. If we don't have peace, Mother Teresa said, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. That's the healing I'm calling for on this Independence Day. Think the way you think. believe the way you believe, but remember that we belong to each other. Nostradamus, I like to follow Nostradamus. It's very entertaining for my mind. He made a lot of predictions, and many of them have come true. And Nostradamus clearly said that it's not going to be the enemy out here that will take this United States down. It will be the enemy within. And a whole bunch of people are going around these days saying, well, the enemy looks like him or her. And the reality is, if everything is consciousness, the enemy looks like me making an enemy. The enemy looks like me with the inability to sit down with compassion and tenderness because somebody else can't do it. You must be responsible for democracy. You must be responsible for unity. I must be the change I want to see in the world, yes? I'm not giving myself wiggle room on that, and it's so much easier to blame somebody else as to why democracy isn't working. And then I go home, and I realize I've made an enemy, and I've contributed to the destruction. I would say that one of the reasons that Unity North, I'm glad that Reverend Carol is here because I think she and I have shared so many thoughts and ideas and experiences when we were up and when we were down. One of the reasons Unity North still exists today is not because of any external reality. It's not why we exist. Oh, we had so many butts in the seat, as we say. Oh, there were so many dollars in the seat. Those are merely effects of a greater cause. Unity North is here because of an internal reality, a commitment to beloved community when it is pretty, and a commitment to beloved community when it isn't pretty. And so on Independence Day, we are called to do the same as a nation. When things are pretty, know it is a beloved community and to celebrate that. When it is not so pretty, is to still know it is a beloved community. At several junctures in the past, this community has come to a precipice of choice. The greatest teacher of choice I've ever met is Reverend Carol O'Connell. The most powerful tool we have on the planet, our ability to decide. Our ability to choose left or right, up or down, forward or back. In this church, we got to decide a number of times to hold on to what divided us or to hold on steadfastly to that which unites us even when it is hard. Unity North, the United States, it's the same principle. It's the same idea. As I prepared for services last week, we celebrated Juneteenth. And this week, Independence Day. I got the first-hand look at the messiness of creation. I got a really good, deep look at the messiness of creation. And we're still, there isn't a destination to creativity. We are evolving. We are growing, always getting into a higher dimension and level. And the dialogues were very important about who should sing what song and why. And who should not sing that song and why. And then it got deeper. Who gets it? Who here gets it and who here doesn't get it? It was uncomfortable. As a white, heterosexual male, it was uncomfortable. We got to another precipice. I got to another precipice of choice, the most powerful place on the planet. And as in past, I was able to find, thank God, because I haven't always done this, to find what the United States needs today, what Unity Church has needed since its inception, and it will need till the rest of its days, the gospel of St. Francis. Seek first to understand, and then to be understood. That's what's going to bring about peace. That's what's going to bring about a united States. That's what's going to bring about a united church, a united congregation. I believe that is my responsibility of freedom. And certainly, it is a responsibility of our future if there is going to be one, yes? And there are those that say, oh, that's simply burying your head in the sand. All you're doing is burying your head in the sand and you're not paying attention. It's quite the opposite. It's pulling your head out of the sand, the muck and the mire of a human condition that has been judged by 1,000 different definitions, and pulling it out of my out of the sand so that I can listen to you, so that I can hear you, so that I can find a place of understanding between us. Putting my head in the sand is my way or the highway, and the ears are shut off. Unity Church stands because we listened to each other, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The United States, you know, there are those that say we're the best nation on the planet. We're better than anybody else. That's a head in the sand. We are an amazing nation, and I'm proud to be an American, and I will sing that song, by the way. But I'm proud to be a citizen of the earth as well, and to celebrate the good of a nation that maybe thinks differently than we do. It's important for the earth, for the Unity Church, and for the country. Parker Palmer understood this same concept when he wrote this: partisanship is not the problem. Demonizing the other side is. He gets even tougher when he says this. Let's read this together. I will not ask to dial down our differences, will not plead for tolerance, a virtue so thin it is barely a virtue. Nor will I spend much time pleading for better manners in public discourse. Manners for the sake of manners are as thin as tolerance. The civility we need will not come from watching our tongues, but from valuing our differences. We are a potpourri. I love that. We are a potpourri, we are a collective, we are an amazing puzzle. And if I say that puzzle piece doesn't belong, the puzzle is incomplete. And it's not easy. That's the easy road out. We don't take the easy way out here. Your piece doesn't belong. Your piece doesn't belong. No, we belong to each other in a United States. You know, we have core values in this ministry. Many of you, I don't usually espouse them. We have our mission statement we talk about all the time. But there are some core values that are the foundational pillars of Unity North. Anybody know what they are? There's easy ones. Unconditional love. Yes, unconditional love. Acceptance. It feels so good. But also one of those values is community. The common unity that we find with different values. But let's go further. Let's go peel that down a little bit more. Diversity is one of our common values. So I ask you today, is it possible that unconditional love, acceptance, and community and diversity can exist in the same field at the same time? Not just yes, but hell yes. Hell yes. And not just hell yes. If we can't demonstrate that here, we're never going to demonstrate it at the national level. If we can't demonstrate that here, then the ground that we stand on is false. And the unity movement is a false teaching. I stand here today because I don't believe it is false. I believe it is possible. And I'm going to hold on like a dog, a pit bull with a bone, about the possibility of peace amongst diversity, of love and acceptance and unconditional love amidst diversity. And that's not easy. It is not easy when I'm in an uncomfortable conversation with my LGBTQ brother or sister, or my black brother or sister, or my Jewish brother or sister that says, please come to a vigil and let us know that we're not alone. To the Mexican immigrant who was my best friend growing up, I have to believe it is possible. We proved it at the microcosm. The time has come for us as a nation, us as a unity movement, and us as Unity North Atlanta Church to prove it at the macrocosm. I'm going to invite Tempe to come back up. And with this dancing that's been going on about what songs to sing and what songs not to sing and who should sing it, this is the song. We went through about 5 or 6, and this is the one she landed on. Just get ready, because I've got just one more thing to say. One last point. The United States of America, as well as unity, is often contextualized in terms of what we're free from. What are we free from? What we reject, or what we are not. Freedom from religious control. Many are drawn to unity. They come to unity for that very reason, because of what it isn't. but our faith is much more than what's missing from it. So many people just come into the door, and it's what's not here, that's fine, but then they miss the whole growth that can happen with what is at a deeper level. You see, unity has a lot more to offer than what it isn't. Our freedom of belief is so much more than our freedom from belief. And I want you to hear that. Our freedom of belief is much more than our freedom from belief. Say that with me. Our freedom of belief is so much more than freedom from. Let's continue. Instead of focusing on what we are free from, let's focus on what we're free for. My favorite of those core values of Unity North, the one that it doesn't always come up as easily as acceptance, unconditional love, and it is service. One for all. One for all. How have I missed that? When we only focus on the freedom from things like fundamentalism, orthodoxy, doctrine, and dogma, we run the risk of robbing ourselves of what unity can do for the world. And we wonder why it is. Why is it the unity movement isn't changing the face of the planet? Because we're all contextualizing our movement by what we're free from. And we're so afraid to speak what we are for. What is my freedom of belief used for? No, I don't want to offend anybody. Is it offensive to speak compassion? To speak oneness? Is it offensive to speak kindness in the midst of hatred? To bring light in the midst of the darkness? If it's offensive, I will be the most offensive person on the planet. Because I'm tired of the division that's defining us. You hear me say often, can you play a little bit of music behind? If you're running from something, you're not really free. Our job as Americans and as Unity students is to run to something, not run away from something. Because if you're running away from somebody, you're always running away, and you are not free. You're still in the same prison that you created. Run to an ideal that was in the founding fathers and mothers of this nation. Run to an ideal that was in the hearts and the minds of the founding mother and father of the Unity movement. Run to the founding principles that were in the hearts and the minds of Carol O'Connell and that congregation. Some of you are still here. Thank God you're still here. Some of you don't even know anybody from that time. But there was an ideal, a divine idea that drove this church, and it will continue to drive this church long after I'm gone. We must hold fast to what unity stands for. Here in Cobb County, we must stand true with our brothers and sisters when there is a Nazi symbol being flashed at them, and I will say, let me stand on the street and be the shield, so that they don't have to deal with that kind of hate. Or if they do, they get to deal with that kind of hate with me on their side. Let me be the one who seeks first to understand. When I want to sing the Black National Anthem and I have to realize it's not appropriate yet, and my black sister says to me, you're expecting me to run a race, and you had a 20-mile head start, we will get there. And it gave me hope to know that at some point in my life, I will be able to sing that amazing anthem and to celebrate with my black brothers and sisters that song. It gives me hope to know that if we in this microcosm can come together, Jews and Muslims and Christians and atheists, Republicans and Democrats and independents and people who just don't care, we can come together and somehow prove something by building a bridge of understanding. That's the ideal of this nation. That's the ideal of this church. That's the ideal of this movement. And I'm saying get ready, because there is a train that is moving to the next paradigm. There is a train that is taking all of us, and you have a ticket. Isn't that a good segue for a song? You've got a ticket for the ride, but you've got to give that ticket. You've got to turn it in. You've got to own it, and you've got to claim it, or you're going to be left behind going, what happened here? We're moving from the Piscean age of division into the Aquarian age of unity and love and compassion, and that's a train I want to be on. And that's a train I will challenge you as Americans and you as Unity students to be on. Don't get left behind.